All right, friends. Well, with that, my clock says it's 9 o'clock, so I think we'll go ahead and get started to honor everyone's time. We may end up ending a little early today, but since we have time, there's time for Q&A. So if you have prepared some questions to ask about special education and YIC, there will definitely be time after the presentation today. All right, to get us started, I will get our agenda up for us. Oops, as usual, I will take care of the mindfulness moment and introduction of presenter, and then I'll turn time over to Melissa. And she's going to share some YIC and special education facts. And with Melissa, we have LauraLee Gillespie from the USBE Special Ed Department, who is here to help answer any of those tough questions that Melissa or my team might not be able to answer. So this morning's mindfulness moment, I found a activity that a preschool teacher had done as part of her mindfulness curriculum. And this was based on the hungry caterpillar. So this was a hungry caterpillar fruit platter, and it was mindful eating for kids. And it helped them learn how to slow down and pay attention instead of just mindlessly eating the food and rushing through their meals. By taking time to cut the fruit and vegetables and prepare, it helped activate all 5 of their senses. And then before the activity began, the teacher read the Hungry Caterpillar book, which I thought was a fun little addition to the activity. But she said students really found this as a great way to slow down, like I said, and savor those tastes and smells and activate all of their senses. So this was a great way to specifically focus on mindful eating. But what the teacher said in reflection is it was a great mindfulness activity in general because it promoted all kinds of conversation between the kids about the flavors they were tasting and the textures of the fruit and vegetables and things of that nature. So this was just a fun little mindful activity that one of the preschool teachers online had shared. The resources there at the bottom of the slide, and of course this will be posted if you want to access more information on that. All right, and then this morning, like I said, we're going to hear from Melissa Teemant, and she is with the Utah Parent Center. She has been working with them since the summer of 2021 and has taken advantage of their services for the last 10 years. She has a son with a disability that graduated last year who was on an IEP. After knowing what she knows, she would have had her other 2 kids on Section 504 plans. Melissa has also been an aide in her neighborhood elementary school, where she loved helping kids learn to read, stay on task, and build up their self-confidences. She is excited to help YIC kids with disabilities be their best and empower parents, caregivers, and professionals to help these children as much as possible. She loves food and doing anything active outdoors, including skiing, mountain biking, and hiking. She is not a fan of sledding now since crashing and having surgery on Christmas Eve. I can commiserate, Melissa. I am no longer a fan of swimming pools after my summer last year. As usual, there's the post-training survey link, and I will send this out as well as post it. And if you have any questions or concerns after the webinar, you're welcome to reach out to USBE YIC. All right, let me get rid of the PowerPoint and grab Melissa's slides. With that, it's time to turn it over to Melissa.
I mentioned I love food, and I really liked your opening slides,
didn't I? Oh, well,
but I didn't eat breakfast, so maybe I didn't like them. I don't know.
Well, I'm glad that worked out the way it did. All right, I'm sorry. Just playing with the screens here, trying to get your slides up. All right, so that should be. All right, friends, did I get the right screen?
Yep.
Awesome. All right, Melissa, just tell me when you're ready for the next one.
Okay, so well, first I just want to ask if I'm assuming most of you are Check and Connect mentors, and I'm just wondering how many of you have heard of the Utah Parent Center. So if you've heard of the Utah Parent Center, like give a thumbs up in the chat. Let's just see how many. Oh, Kim's a total fan. All right. Awesome. So if you've heard of us, just give a thumbs up. If you haven't, maybe give a thumbs down that you just haven't heard of us. or maybe you don't know. Oh, Kelly sits by Christine. She said there was a Check and Connect mentor that sat by her that she said was awesome. All right. Well, I'm so glad. It looks like almost everyone has heard of us. So I'm actually pleasantly surprised. That's great. That's not what I expected. So that's awesome. So you can go to the next slide. So what we are, I'll just give a brief overview of the Parent Center. But we're a nonprofit training and information center. All states have a training and information center, and we are the one designated for the state of Utah. And we just want to help kids and young adults with any disability live included and productive lives as members of the community. And obviously, parent can mean any kind of guardian. And we also work with professionals. Okay, next slide. And so our kind of what we're built on is that we are parents helping parents. So all of us to work at the Parent Center, you have to have a child with a disability. So I think there's about 45 employees. So that's a lot of different disabilities and a lot of life experiences. And so we're all familiar with the disability world. Our kids have either been on IEPs or 504s, or they're on them right now. And just with our unique perspective, it just gives us a good opportunity to provide real life experiences and empathetic peer support, and just the positive lessons and negative lessons that we've learned. So if you call and ask a question and I don't know an answer, then one of my coworkers is probably has an answer or has been through that experience or something. So we're always sending emails daily about particular questions. Okay, next slide. So what we do, we're a services statewide to all parents and children with youth, and the professionals that work with them. So we mostly work with parents, but as you know, in the youth and custody world, there's not too many parents that are calling about their child's educational needs. So that's kind of where you come into play. You guys are the ones on the ground checking on these students regarding their schoolwork and behaviors and attendance and things like that. So you might be the one that sees that this child's really struggling, in whatever way, and or suspect they have a disability. And you can call and ask questions, or tell the foster parent or teacher even to call and ask questions too. So you guys, I feel like, are kind of a key player in this, as you already know you are. I don't know how much relationship you have with foster parents, but just let them know about us. So we do one-on-one consultations over the phone or email. And I was just looking through the call log at some of examples of questions that we might have, or things that have come up. So I don't know if I'll just kind of read a few and see if they ring a bell to any of you. So a parent called and said they don't agree with the IEP, or they don't think it's going as planned or not working well. The behavior is really a problem and feel like it's impacting their education. Wondering about different graduation options. Child with a disability is kicked out of school due to behaviors. What's next? Problem with a teacher that's shaming a child. Schools dragging their feet with an evaluation. The foster parent doesn't want to be the parent at the IEP meetings. The biological parent wants to be involved in the child's education. The student maybe doesn't qualify for special education, but they have some kind of disability. So what should you do? So those are just, I don't know if those kind of ring a bell, but those are kind of some of the things that easily come up. That's kind of those are kind of common questions. So if you have any of those questions and many more, give us a call. So, and then we also do trainings. So most of them are in Zoom, some are in person, but like a week or two ago, I did a panel of youth in custody professionals. So Jeff Sagers, who's Check and Connect, thank you, Jeff, if you're on. He was on, and we had a vocational rehab, and we had a special education teacher from Granite School District all on and asking some questions. Someone just did a training on girls and autism. Last night, I just attended one that was transitioning to adult life. So most of them are over Zoom. So even if it says like Granite School District is putting this on, but if it's over Zoom and you live in Tooele, like you can still attend. People do that all the time. It doesn't matter where you live. If it's over Zoom, you can attend. And then we do information assistance, so we can attend IEP meetings if we're available. Like if you feel like there's not great collaboration or communication between the parties, you don't feel like it's going well, then we can attend. We can even attend virtually if it's far. So, and then all of our services are free. We really, we work on trying to make everything free to parents, because we know with disabilities and youth in custody, there's a lot of expenses that go along. And so we want to make all of our services free. Okay, next slide. So our parent training and information is our backbone of our organization, and that's where we started. And that kind of is where I'm at, and that focuses on school-related issues regarding disability, but it doesn't have to. It can be any kind of questions. And then Transition University is a whole curriculum developed by a team to guide parents to life after school. So like it might deal, questions about guardianship and jobs, life skills, wills, things like that. And then our Utah Family Voices, they are a team of, and everyone that works at the Parent Center right now is all women. It's not like we're selective. That's just all that applies. So they don't offer insurance. So that's probably a big reason. But anyway, so this team of women, they deal with all things medical and mental related. So like where you can go get like a temporary ramp, or applying for DSPD, or respite care, resources for anxiety, things like that. And then our Family to Family Network, that is actually run by parent volunteers, and that's designed to educate and strengthen parents that have children with disabilities. And it's a lot focuses on those that are on the DSPD waiting list, the Division of Services for People with Disabilities waiting list. And we just facilitate that through the Parent Center. Okay, next slide. So part of our parent and training information, we have specific consultants. So I think as Kelly said, that she sits next to Christine. So for Tooele County, we have someone that specifically just works with Tooele County or Tooele School District. And then we have, and the ones that are listed are all have a specific parent consultant that works with that district. And I am in this group, even though I am statewide. So I am with Youth in Custody. So if you're welcome to reach out. If you're covered by one of these, you're welcome to reach out to the person that is over your district, or to me. So it's fine. And sometimes we just say, hey, can you help me with this or whatever? So, and then if you're in a district that doesn't have a consultant, then we actually have, I think, 5 statewide consultants that can help anyone that is throughout the state. So, and I'll talk about my role a little bit later. Okay, next slide. So the Utah Parent Center website has a wealth of information, and I know I have not at all seen all that's on there. I even had someone refer something to my website to me, and I was like, oh yeah, that's on our website. So, but it has a ton of information. So on that homepage at the bottom, that is where you can sign up for our newsletter. And I promise it's not like too buggy, and you can unsubscribe if you don't want to, but the newsletter includes upcoming events. You can also sign up for a newsletter that might have disability specific information. We just put out our summer fun list. And so on our newsletter, but that's also on our website too. And then our about is just, our different projects and consultants if you want to get their numbers. And then our resources, that's or our disabilities, that has disability specific information on there. The resources page is where most of the information is. You can get our publications, and we make publications, little booklets that we're willing to ship out for free. And we have on there's a tab for transition information, behavior link, IEPs, bullying, math help, mental health. I mean, just a ton of different things to choose from, and a ton of things in that tab itself. And then our events, if you go in there, there's just our calendar of our upcoming workshops and everything so that's where you can go sign up for a workshop that's being offered in there. And then Spanish, almost everything that we have is in Spanish, and we have 2 Spanish speaking consultants and 2 Spanish speaking admins. So we can definitely cover, if you have Spanish speaking parents that would like to talk. And then you can go to the next slide. More partnerships. And then it looks like we're also going to be working with CHAD, which is the ADHD support group. We'll be hosting their meetings in our building, I believe. And then Medical Home Portal at the bottom, that is a great website to help find providers and facilities. And we manage that. Okay, next page. So my role as youth in custody consultant, it's just new, and we are, so I want to make connections and have access to people that are, or these people have access to me, that are the biological parents and adoptive parents, foster parents, grandparents, kinship, a family that has a child in and out of custody. I mean, if they just went out of custody, we still want to service them because they're still dealing with a lot of the same things. And just any kind of questions about their educational needs. I'd love to work with caseworkers and case managers, the YIC school teams, check and connect mentors, you guys, school administration, and any professional that works with children and families in custody. So DCFS and JGYS. Okay, next slide. Talking about disabilities of students in state custody. So 11 to 13% have a disability in Utah, but in state custody, it's 33.23% in the school year. So there is a much higher percentage of kids that have IEPs, or I mean, that have disabilities. And so we want to help these, because we know already youth in custody kids are a very vulnerable population, but then when you add a disability on top of that, they're a very vulnerable group. Okay, next slide. So I'm just going to do a brief overview of the individualized education program, or special education. It's called IEP for short. And this is part of the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And it's a federal law that's for children with disabilities that provides an individualized education program for that child, for their experience at school. And I appreciate LauraLee here to back me up on anything. And if you want to interject or correct me on anything, then just go ahead. So I just want to ask so another thumbs up, if you've been invited to an IEP meeting before. Give me a thumbs up if you've been invited. And I just am wondering how many get involved in this. Okay, so quite a few. That is so great. And if you haven't, or if there's a specific school that you haven't, been, let them know, because it really is a team effort. And so you are really part of, you're really part of that child's team, and you might know some things about that child that other people don't know. They might have opened up about something that would be good to share. And obviously you need to be discretionary on like what kind of things you share. But if you know that child's going through a hard time, you can say, you know what, this kid's having a hard time. So let your schools know that you are out there and that you would like to be involved. And maybe you're saying, I don't want to go to another meeting, but it's a great way that you can help these kids. And you really are a key player. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the IEP process, we're just going to go over the IEP. And so we'll go over each of these steps separately, but I just want you guys to see them all together. But it starts with referral, and that can either be from the parent or the school personnel or DCFS or guardian. There's a lot of people that can make a referral. And the school does an evaluation by doing a number of different assessments, and then they decide if the child is eligible for special education, to see if they can classify them into one of the 13 categories determined by the IDEA. And then an IEP meeting is held with the parents and others, the team, to determine the needs and goals, and they determine where the child's placement is. And the placement means what kind of services they'll be getting, which is different from location. I know in the YIC world, placement means location, but in the special education world, it means what kind of services they're getting. And at this point, then the IEP is implemented and carried out. And then once every year, they do an annual review IEP meeting with the parents to determine like the new goals for the year, because obviously they need new goals, and make sure the placement's correct, and if they need to do different things. And then they do an evaluation every 3 years. So they do it initially, and then they'll do it every 3 years. But if they feel like they need to do it sooner, then they can do it sooner. So my son, he had special education. He went to a resource class for math, but I knew his reading was really struggling. And so I asked them if they could do a reading evaluation, and they said, sure. And sure enough, they did that. And he qualified for that also. And so that was before the 3-year mark. So if they feel like that is something that needs to be done, then they can do that. Okay, next slide.
Melissa, can I just make a comment here?
Yeah.
So this is LauraLee from the State Board of Education. I will just tell you that a lot of your students who are in custody are already identified. So quite honestly, most of them, we need to find out if they have an IEP already in place. So when students come to you, and they may not know, but work with those who work with them to find out if some of this process is already in place, because as Melissa pointed out, 33% are already identified. And because they're moving around so much, a lot of times the records don't follow. So please do what you can to help identify those who've already been identified.
And that is a huge problem. IEPs get lost along the way. And so it's a lot of detective work for the YIC teams to try to get those IEPs and their education records, because they might be somewhere for a while and then they move and are somewhere for 2 weeks and then somewhere else for 2 weeks and then a more permanent place. So things get lost along the way. And so, yeah, that's a huge problem in the YIC world, a huge problem. And sometimes the kids know what services they have, but usually they don't really know the specifics. Okay, next slide. Yeah, identifying, Carolyn, the correct placements. You know that they have an IEP, but trying to figure out what those services are. And sometimes you have to do your best for just a week or two until you can find something. And then maybe a school might have to reevaluate if they cannot find that IEP. So the first step is child find. So like LauraLee said, like a lot of these, this is about identifying those kids. So a lot of those kids have been identified, but some haven't. Sometimes they are moving around a lot and they are not identified. And so all LEAs, so that would be the districts and the charter schools, they're all required to have policies and procedures in place. So charter schools are just responsible for those students enrolled in their school, but the district is required to identify those that are all in their whole district. So, and that might be, there's more, but it includes the highly mobile and homeless, students who have been suspended or expelled, students who have not graduated with a regular diploma, those who are suspected of having a disability and in need of services, but they're advancing from grade to grade. I think that's a lot of concern in the YIC world is let's just get this kid passed, but yet they really are struggling and they're really needing some additional services. And then obviously those in state care and custody too. Okay, next slide. Okay, so the evaluation eligibility for special education. So like I said, you could request an evaluation. The DCFS worker can be requested. Anyone, there's a lot of people that can request it. So, but it's best to be done in writing. We know that everybody is overworked and so things slip through the cracks. And so have something in writing so that there's a paper trail. Or email trail, so, and if you haven't heard for a while, then, reach out again and say, hey, just wondering, did you get my email about this or whatever? And then you should express the concerns and the needs of the students. So what kind of problems you're seeing, you're looking at their classwork, you're looking at their grades and things and saying, they're really struggling in this and not understanding it. And maybe that student is telling you some things. So, right, all those things. And then the school has 45 days to evaluate once they get consent from the parent to evaluate. But then if it is a request from DCFS, then they have 30 days. So it's not even 30 school days, it's 30 days. I think this is a silly rule because I think it should be if anyone requests for a child in custody, but the rules say DCFS. So if you request an evaluation, maybe have the caseworker also, because you're not an employee of the DCFS, right? You're with the school district. So anyway, it will be quicker because we want these kids to be identified and taken care of as soon as possible because we know they're mobile. And so they must answer, and then they must answer yes to all three of these questions. So once they do evaluate them, then they have to answer yes. So does the student have a qualifying disability? We'll talk about what those are. Does the disability adversely affect the student's educational performance? And does the student require specially designed instruction? And if they answer yes to all three of these, then they qualify for special education. Okay, next slide.
Before we move on, Melissa,
Uh-huh.
in the chat, it was asked, does the request have to be from the DCFS caseworker or can it be from the foster parent?
Yeah, it can be from the foster parent for sure. And I guess a foster parent is employed by, are they employed by DCFS? I don't know if that counts as a DCFS. It seems like it should.
They are paid for by DCFS because it's a contracted, they're contracted essentially with DCFS. So a foster parent specifically would work under Utah foster care, right? But DCFS is paying Utah foster care to employ that foster parent. So it's kind of tricky.
Yeah.
And the foster parent would typically be treated similar to the parent. There's some tricky rules around that we're not going to go into because it's pretty detailed, but I think if a foster parent went into a school and requested an assessment, they'd be treated similar to a parent in most cases.
Yeah. So, I mean, we don't want to hold up the process by having the caseworker do it, who are, they're super overworked. So I think request it, but then maybe have a caseworker also request it, so that it can be expedited but also get it moving, because you don't want to delay.
I always have the caseworker do it because it is faster.
Good. Yeah. And if the caseworker is on the ball and getting that in, then that is obviously the best. Okay, so there's these are the 13 disabilities under the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And so they need to be classified into one of these. And so, but you might have a child that has autism and deafness and orthopedic impairment. But they only fit into one of these categories that's listed on their IEP. Obviously, we're not saying that they don't have all the other, but the school looks at what is impacting their education the most and put them under. So maybe they have autism, deafness, and orthopedic impairment. So maybe they say the deafness is impacting their education the most. But so they would put that under, but that doesn't mean they can't get services for their orthopedic impairment or their autism. So what was that last comment? Let's see.
There was a couple. So
there's a couple here.
Yeah. So the first one that popped while you were chatting was where they could find that rules citing.
And I just put that in the chat.
Thank you, friend.
Awesome. Thank you.
And then, oh, it keeps popping. Comment about ADHD with a doctor's note, maybe was what the rest of that would say.
And that's actually one of the things I was going to talk about, is that you do not have to have a diagnosis to be able to get special education. It's always helpful and that's always great, but you don't have to have, so like my son, he just had a diagnosis for ADHD. And that's another question. I had a Check and Connect worker say, we need to get this child an IEP process or something. And then she came back with an email and says, oh, we found out he just has ADHD. So he just needs a 504. And that's not necessarily true. ADHD can fit into an IEP. And then also with ADHD, with a lot of disorders, there's a lot of things that go along with it. And so like my son, he had ADHD and we knew he had a hard time paying attention. But once they did the evaluation, they found out that he actually has a learning disability. And so we haven't ever gotten an official diagnosis that he has a learning disability, but with IDEA, he qualified as having a learning disability. So, but also if they don't have a learning disability or anything else, ADHD, if it's really significantly impacting their education, that would certainly fit into special education.
Can I just comment on that as well?
Yeah.
So something just to keep in mind is when you're determining if a student qualifies for special education, you're first determining does the student have a disability? And second, does the student require specially designed instruction? Both of those pieces have to be there for a student to qualify. So I noticed that there's questions in the chat about, do I have to have a doctor's note for ADHD? Like Melissa was saying, you don't. But what you do have to have is a medical history. And this is where people get confused a lot. What we want to do first is we want to evaluate the student to see if the student has a disability and qualifies for special education. And in that process, if they have ADHD and the doctor's written some sort of medical history and information about that, it's wonderful if the parent or the foster parent or whoever the student is with can provide that information, because that information may help in determining that a student qualifies under other health impairment. So what you need to know is that with several of the categories, there's a requirement for medical information sometimes. It's not a diagnosis, it's medical information, and it's called a medical history. And it's telling us about specific syndromes, health concerns, or medications that the student may be on. And it doesn't have to come from a doctor, but it can. And I will put a TA document in the chat if you're interested in learning more about this.
Yeah, thank you. And also, I know that I have a friend that's a nurse, and I was talking to her about this, and she was saying, oh, I didn't know any of this, because I know that we say, oh yeah, this child has autism, he needs an IEP. Well, the doctor actually doesn't get to decide if they have an IEP, because a child could have autism and do just fine in school. Academically, functionally, they can do just fine. And so they would not need specially designed instruction. That would actually hold them back. And so just sometimes a lot of doctors are not informed about that. They aren't the ones, they can recommend that, but it's really, the school determines on if they qualify for an IEP. Okay, next slide. Okay, so this is the IEP team members. So I like this visual because it kind of represents that everybody is sitting around a table, everyone's on the same team. No one is superior to anyone. Everyone really has to work together. It really is a team. And if someone is, I recommend sitting around a circle, so that everybody feels comfortable. And so the team members, so the parent, and we'll talk about what a parent means on the next slide, but a parent is required to be there. And then I have a student on there, because a student, if once they turn 14, then the student is required to be invited and to get their input on their team, because they need to be an advocate for themselves on their disability, their needs, and things like that. My son was like, no way, I am not coming to that meeting. And so I'm sure there are lots of kids like that. And so we still got his input, and he said he was interested in certain things. And so we still got his input, and he was invited to come. The special education teacher, they are obviously implementing the IEP, and so they need to for sure be there. And then the regular education teacher, I have a star by that, because sometimes a child might not be in the regular education classroom, and so regular education teacher might not be invited. But the rules say that if they may be in a general ed class, then they should be invited. And we really want to be inclusive to these kids with disabilities. I don't know if you feel the same way, but when I went to school, I don't really remember hardly any special education kids in my classes. And that has really changed. And my kids at the junior high, they did a peer tutor class where they went and helped the kids in special education go to some classes, go to PE, go to a cooking class, and they loved it. My kids loved it. The kids that are in special education loved it. It's a really win-win. My son took this kid to a cooking class, and then my son said, I want to take cooking class. Like, he realized, like, I gotta make and eat snacks at school. So, and then we saw them at a mountain bike race later, and, saying hi to each other. So it's such a great experience that these kids are included. And so we really, if there's any way possible, we want to get the kids in a general education classroom as much as we can. And then the LEA representative is usually like the principal or a vice principal. Dancing class. I love that. There's so many classes that they can participate in, and everyone enjoys it really when they're in those classes. The LEA representative could be the principal. They might assign it to the vice principal, but they are really important to be there because they ultimately make like the financial decisions and if things are really possible. And then the related service provider, so there can be an IE team of 4 people, or there can be an IEP team of 20 people. Those related service providers would be like you, a Check and Connect mentor, caseworker, maybe a speech therapist. It could have a private counselor. The school counselor is sometimes a forgotten team member that should be invited. Anyway, someone that can interpret the results. There's so many other people, and you are welcome to invite anyone. If the school invites other people, then they should notify you. But another great person, and we'll talk about them more, is vocational rehab that works with kids with disabilities. Okay, next slide. And also, like, some people can attend via Zoom. So if a parent can't get off work or something, but they can take an hour or so, and they feel good about that, then they can attend over Zoom. Some of these kids might have a biological parent that lives in Ogden, and that kid is in North Summit or whatever, and so they can do that over Zoom, so the parent doesn't have to travel. Okay, next slide is the parent. Okay, so the parent, the parent can mean a few different things. So obviously the biological adoptive parent, we want them to be involved as much as possible. We kind of had a talk about this last night on who has the educational rights. But I think if the biological parent can be invited, either way is better for, usually, unless the school or the judge feels like that's not a good situation. But if they can be involved in their child's education, that is a win-win for everybody. Helps with reunification. Sometimes the kids respond better with that. Then also,
Amanda, oh, now it's back. The screen was going all over the place.
I bumped my mouse. I'm sorry.
Oh.
A guardian, a foster parent, and the foster parent can be a parent, but there are some rules that the foster parent, so the foster parent has to, the biological parent has to not have their educational rights or not want to be involved in that child's education. They have to have a long-term parental relationship with the student, which is kind of a, sometimes these kids might only be in a placement for 2 weeks. So that's just kind of a hard situation, but the district has to discern how to interpret that. And then the foster parent has to be willing to make the educational choices. And then the foster parent can't have any conflict of interest. So if they work for DCFS in another role, or if they work for the district, or maybe have a child in the same class, that would be a conflict of interest. And so they shouldn't be the parent in this situation. Let's see, a person who's responsible for the student's welfare, a person acting in the place of a parent with whom the student lives. So that could be like a grandparent or aunt or uncle, adult with power of attorney or other legal authority to make educational decisions, and then a surrogate parent. So a surrogate parent is assigned by the district or the charter. And we have a list, we keep a list of certified surrogate parents at the Utah Parent Center. The state has asked us to do that. And so I just did training like a month ago. And so they all actually have children that have IEPs themselves. And so they're already familiar with the process. And then they just want to volunteer and help out. And so they're very willing to help too. And then something in the rules, it says the biological or adoptive parent, when attempting to act as the parent, and when more than one party is qualified to act as a parent, must be presumed to be the parent. So unless that parent does not have legal authority to make educational decisions. So if there's more than one person that says, so maybe this kid lives with grandma, but the parent says, I want to actually be involved, then they should be the one that is still the parent, unless they don't have their educational rights. Okay, next slide. Okay, so these are the components of the IEP. So first, it's the present levels of academic achievement and functional performance, kind of a mouthful. We usually call it PLAFT or the present levels. And so they, this is where you identify the needs. So this is where the evaluations and assessments, we look at those and say, okay, where is this kid lacking? But also really should be strength-based. What are they good at? What are their interests? And let's build on those. And then identifying their needs for academic and functional. So that could be like if they need an adaptive PE class or things like that. And this is kind of the most important starting point, because this is really what everything that's on the IEP is going to be built off this. So if you want it part of the IEP, it needs to be here, and it should have the parents and the teachers' concerns. And if you have input, this should be here. The next is the goals, and the goals, this is what a child is expected to learn in a 12-month period. So sometimes the goal might seem a little out of reach, but it's actually for 12 months. And so, but it's appropriate to put benchmarks in along the way if you feel like that would be appropriate, to kind of see where they're going. You know, if they're not meeting certain benchmarks, then maybe we need to reconvene the IEP meeting and determine a new goal. And the goals should be SMART goals. So SMART is an acronym for specific, measurable, attainable, and results oriented. So if they, if you're in an IEP meeting and you see these goals and they don't meet that, then that's not really a good goal. And maybe we need to relook at this. I had a coworker, a mom brought her the child's IEP and said, you know, we're not really sure if we don't feel like things are going well. And my coworker looked at the goal and it was like, I don't remember what it was, but it was like related to some test that they will demonstrate proficiency. Well, what is proficiency? What is it, even that test? I mean, would a general education teacher know what that test is? Do you know what that test is? If you don't understand it, then you're not in special education, and that is what most of the people are in. And so if you don't understand it, then ask to have it clarified. Because it really needs to make sense to everyone on the team. And then the services include the specialized instruction. So, and that could include like occupational therapy or speech therapy and counseling with school psychologists, lots of different services. And then the supports are anything that can help support that child. So that could be assistive technology. They might need to sit at the front of the class. They might have transportation needs. They might need to listen to a book instead of reading the book. Anything like that. So are there any questions on that IEP? Okay, go to the next slide. Okay, so I originally didn't have this on my slideshow, and it was reviewed by USPE, and they said, you know, transition is really important for the YIC kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. Like that is a really important piece to these kids' education. They're going to transition out, and they might not have more supports. And so they really need to be involved in their transition and their figuring out like how to live independently on their own. And so when they turn 14 or older, like I said, they need to be invited to the IEP meeting. And it's best when the meeting is student-led. So if the student can, depending on their ability, like if they can actually lead the meeting and say, you know, talk about their present levels, like this is what I'm good at, this is what I am not good at, this is what I hate, this is where I need some extra support. Like, first of all, everyone's going to listen a lot more if the kid is involved. And really it's not someone making decisions for them. They're helping make that decision. But it should have the post-secondary transition assessments measurable goals in the areas of education, training, employment, and independent living. And so that could be like education and training. It could like, what is your goal about graduating? You know, do you want to graduate on time? Do you want to, it looks like maybe your credits are a little low, but do you feel like you could graduate in another year? And like, what does that look like? Employment, what kind of things, and also like with education, like making sure that helping them get signed up for the ACT on time, making them aware of scholarships that are available, making sure they know about trade school options and things like that. And then independent living, well, employment might be like, what are they interested in? So my son said he wanted to be a doctor, and maybe that's not possible. Maybe it is. I don't know. But so they said, and I didn't know this, they said, hey, we have an EMT class. Why don't you sign up for that class and see how you do and how you like it? And so he did, and he loved the class. And so that kind of can help guide them. But also like maybe a child wants to be, so say he took that EMT class and then he says, you know, I hated that actually. That was too graphic. I don't want to see any of that. And it's a great, so school is a great time for them to try things and experience things. So great. And
Melissa, along those lines, just to point out, just going back to what you just described about your son, that's exactly what post-secondary transition planning is. The student is thinking about what their interests, strengths, and needs are. They're saying, look, my goal is to be this when I leave school. So what can I do while I'm in school to kind of explore that? Take the class, go and do an internship. Learn about, maybe you're just doing a survey of your own or a research project about what it takes to do those specific things. And whatever it is that we can do to help them prepare, they may say, this isn't for me. I may want to do something else. That's the whole point of it. I'm going to put a few resources in the chat for those of you who are interested in them as well.
Thank you. And then the independent living, that could be, I mean, these kids are going to be on their own most likely. And so a cooking class would, even if they're not interested in it, that might be a really good thing for them to just know some basic cooking skills. And maybe they work on budgeting or independent or transportation, things like that. Let's see. And so also, and I'm going to talk about VR and the TAL coordinators, the transition to a living, adult living coordinators, but they should be invited, and they are going to help these kids work on these goals also. But I like what LauraLee said, like this is a time for them to explore, and they need to be a self-advocate. You need information, you need options, you need experiences to make good choices. And if I don't know what a strawberry tastes like or feels like, then I can't make an informed decision on if I like it or not. So this time in school is a great time to try out these things. And then each year, it should be built on the next thing. So maybe they've taken the cooking class. Okay, we're good there, and I don't really want to do any more of that. What else are you interested, or what are some other things that you might need? I think all kids in school, I don't think it's just my district, that they need to take a financial literacy class, and really talk about some of the things that they've learned in there. So lots of good things can come now. So like at the end, the last point says what goals and supports would help now. So classes, trying new experiences, and vocational rehab. Vocational rehab will come in and do a pre-ETS, which is pre-employment training services. And they kind of give them experiences and show them different employment options. They show them like maybe what kind of skills they need to work on to be able to work in these places, things like that. And they can actually come through the school and do that. or a child can do that on their own. And they don't have to be signed up for vocational rehab to participate in that pre-employment stuff. Okay, next slide.
Real quick before we move on, I just want to get a chat before it disappears. So there was a question about a person who had participated in the IEP, and the LEA expected the student to achieve 100% of the behavior goal. Is that fair and realistic?
Well, I don't exactly know what that means, but I mean,
That might be a LauraLee question.
Are we all 100% good behavior? I don't think so. I know, someone said, that they will stay on task 100% of the time. Well, we know that straight A student's not staying on task 100% of the time. It's
so I think
it's
it
unachievable.
Depends. Yeah,
Sorry.
I think it depends, and I know that that's a kind of seems like a lame answer, but the reason I say that is because it depends on where the student's present levels are. How has the student been doing? It looks like what you're saying in the chat is that they were previously 60%, now they're wanting 100%. Based on that alone, I would say that's probably not a reasonable goal. We'd need to look at the data and information about how the student has been doing to see if the goal is appropriate or not. But with that being said, the school or the LEA can't just say, this is what it is. It's a team decision, and parents are a part of that team. So if the parents don't feel that that's an appropriate or reasonable or realistic goal, they need to speak up. And this is where the Parent Center is so invaluable in helping parents to advocate for their students. So that the whole question there is where is the student currently at? But if the parent doesn't feel that's an appropriate goal, then we need to have a further conversation to determine a goal that is appropriate that the team can agree upon.
And behavior can mean lots of different things to lots of different people. And so, that a student with a disability might have much different behavior kind of expectations than a child without a disability. And so it is kind of a tough question. Okay, next slide. Okay, so I really want to try to sell these guys and transition to adult living coordinators and vocational rehab counselors. And you guys might already be sold on it, but the problem is we need to sell the kids on these services. We can give them information, but ultimately it's a volunteer. The student has to decide if they want to do it or not. And so that's really the hardest part. But if we can help talk about these services and be excited about them, I don't know if a check and connect mentor, if you could, you're meeting with them at one of your meetings, could you invite the TAL coordinator to come meet with you and the student and get to know them so that they know it's not a scary or weird situation. And then VR, and invite them to the IEP meetings that hopefully the child might be participating in as well. And so just the two, so the transition to adult living coordinators, that is for any child that is in DCFS custody. JGYS kind of has their own system, but this is for DCFS custody. And then vocational rehab is for any person with a disability, and that can be physical or mental. They said the majority of the people that they help actually have a mental disability, like anxiety or depression. So, if you're a kid that can have straight A's, but you can't hold a job, then this would be a great resource to tap into. You can do that. And the TAL coordinators, they work with kids from 14 to 21, and in some cases till 26, and VR 14, both of them are 14. So they are perfect transition people to be inviting to that meeting. And so they're 14 to whenever. And both of them work on employment skills and living skills, anything the child kind of needs to be able to be independent. And this is what the cool thing is, they can actually provide funding for employment training. So I think it was the TAL coordinator I was talking to. I mean, he said that a lot of the kids, like during COVID, they lost their jobs because they work in a lot of service industry. And so they were able to help pay for their rent while they were looking for another job, as long as they are like progressing and then like VR and I think TAL can also, like, if a child is going to school but they can't pay rent, or they need maybe a little help with their tuition or their trade school, whatever it is, they can help provide funding for that. And I personally don't know how easy it is to get that, but I think they want to help these kids, because we know that it costs the state a lot more if we're having to take care of people than if they can take care of themselves. So we want to help them take care of themselves. And the TAL coordinators, they work with workforce services. So workforce services works with anyone that has kind of limitations, like low income or youth in custody, to gain employment. They might have some limitations to be able to gain employment. And so they will connect them with them. VR can also provide assistive technology. So if a student needs a wheelchair or something like that, they can help provide those. And I don't even know all that they can provide. They can provide so much more. And so if we can just help these kids realize how valuable these resources are. And so I just want to ask, if someone wants to take off mute, like, have you had any good success stories on kids taking advantage of these services? Have you had, I mean, have you ever, and maybe you don't know if they've taken advantage of them because you might be in a different realm, but
I'll chime in just for the sake of supporting what you've said. I started my career with vocational rehabilitation many moons ago with the Division of Services to the Deaf and Hard of Hearing, and there are a myriad of services that individuals with disabilities can access through VR. Everything from vocational training all the way through university access to, in essence, try to mitigate the barriers to employment. So I can't speak more highly about this. In most cases, VR and DWS has systems for serving school-age youth and getting them on-ramped to the services they provide. So yes, it can be a significant game changer for students and families.
Yeah, and I was talking to the VR a VR person, and they were just like, please let these YIC people know about us, because we just feel like we're missing the boat. You know, we're not getting access to them as much. So my kids like making the milestones and TAL. Yeah, I mean, it's a great way for the kids to like feel like they've achieved something, right? There's little milestones. So even if it's just self-confidence, and with the TAL coordinators, they actually have like a committee that's full of just youth that are in the that are foster kids or that have been, and so they kind of help provide some experience, you know, like they'll help recommend things like this is helpful or this is not helpful, and things like that. So it's super great program. Okay, next slide.
Melissa, can I just say one other thing about vocational rehabilitation?
Yeah.
The reality is that students with disabilities and special education in particular, as Travis pointed out, what we do is essentially we switch plans. It's an IEP or an individualized education program when they're in school. When they go to vocational rehabilitation, it's an individualized plan for employment. So let's make more acronyms and call it an IPE, which is just reversing the letters on us here. But I think that's the key, is that a lot of people think about vocational rehabilitation and they're like, oh, they can provide all these services. Well, what they're really there to do is to help a student with a disability to become employed. And so what is it that student needs? And if you think about it, meshing an IEP into an IPE actually makes sense in some respects. because we're essentially saying, okay, now the student's transition plan, their post-secondary transition plan has all of these things that they want to do. How can VR help them to get there? So if the teams can work together, if the VR counselors, and I put a link in the chat that lists, there's a counselor assigned to every secondary setting. If they can work together, it can be a seamless process. So if you have students that are in your youth and custody settings who are on an IEP and this isn't being discussed as part of the IEP meeting, it should maybe be brought up. Somebody needs to kind of trigger that question about, have we talked about what the employment plan might look like and how vocational rehabilitation might be involved?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with these YIC kids, this is the most important thing, right? I mean, if they get a B or a C in their English class, it's here nor there. Like, this is their independent living. I feel like this should be emphasized more than anything. And I don't know, I mean, I know schools know about VR, but I don't know if regular schools know about the TAL coordinator, because this is a DCFS thing. And so you might need to tell these schools about the TAL coordinators, and sometimes they forget about the VR counselors. Like, you might need to be the one that's educating these schools, you know, the YIC directors, and they know about them, but, you know, just the regular, you know, Skyline High School, they might not know about a TAL coordinator. And so you might need to educate them. And I feel like I keep this whole presentation, I'm like, you guys are the missing link. You guys are the link to help these kids, because I think you're really a key person. So, okay, next slide. And my computer just said it signed out. Nice.
Oh no.
Melissa, can I just add something while you work that
Yeah.
out? So
Yes.
we've met recently with VR counselors, and they are super eager to help. And I know that there was some, like, a waiting list prior to COVID and some other things that kind of hindered some relationships between like the youth and care world and VR, but things have since changed. There's no waiting list. They're eager to serve students that are in state's custody. And so if you for some reason have some kind of barrier because maybe a bad past experience or something, I would just like try to chop that down and reach out to your local person, because they are super eager to help. There's been a lot of changes and there's no waiting list. And so they can get involved right away.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah.
And real quick, I just want to add, as you're advocating in these schools, you know, work with your supervisors if you're running into walls. And then if you need us, you have us. Julia is a former DCFS worker. She has a wealth of knowledge. She has good contacts. LauraLee has the other side of that fence with the special ed universe. So just reach out to us if there's, you know, supports needed for advocating for the kiddos.
Yeah. Okay, next slide. Well, and all these services are free. So, and then we have developed some new publications with Transition University, and some of these are not maybe going to apply because, like, guardianship, I don't know if that will apply to too many. But the Choices Catalog, that is a comprehensive guide for families. It goes into, like it says at the bottom, like SSI and Medicaid and ABLE accounts, financial and estate planning. But I really like this middle book for you, because it is it's for youth to actually fill out, and it helps them figure out what they want to do, like helps them figure out what their interests and what they're good at, and what they want to accomplish in their life. And then it also talks about like soft skills that they need to work on to be successful, like how to communicate and things like that. So it is geared for disabilities, but I think it could easily be geared for anyone. But then I found this, and I'll put this in the chat. There is a link to, I just found this, and maybe you guys already know about this, but it's a life course tools that's for transitioning out of foster care. And it has a lot of the same material. I think we probably got it from that same source. It's a great little workbook that you can print out, or they can do it online. And then the guardianship is also, obviously obtaining guardianship, but then we also have, and we can mail these publications out to you. So if you contact me or just call the Parent Center, you can request and we can send you a paper copy of this workbook. But you can also go on our website, and if you go under sources or resources and publications and then transition, I think, then these will be in here, and you can take a look and see if this would fit your child that you're working with. And this is something that you could fill out. But we also have publications like about IEPs and 504s and our newsletter. And then there's lots of information sheets that we also have that can help with different little things. Okay, next slide. Okay, so behavior. I know as Check and Connect mentors, that is one thing that you are checking on is behaviors. And so can behaviors be written to the AP? And yes, it definitely can. And you're monitoring that. And so you might know that needs a little more help. If they already have an IEP, then this is a great, let's get this looked at and see if we need to include something else. And the law actually, the law actually helps kids from losing their free and appropriate public education. You might have heard of that, FAPE, because of behavior. So the purpose of addressing behavior in the IEP is to provide some positive behavior supports and to teach the student skills for appropriate behavior. And the law says that if a student is if a student is suspended for 10 days on that 10th day, then they will qualify. Well, then the school needs to do, it's called a manifestation determination. They need to figure out if their behavior is related to their disability. And they need to figure out if the IEP is not being implemented correctly, or they need to change some things on the IEP and look at that. And then if it is related to their disability, they need to be returned back to their placement in school and work on those things. If they determine that they are not, if their behavior was not because of their disability, then they have the same consequences as any child without a disability. Then they can stay expelled, but the LEA is still responsible for providing their education. Okay, next slide. So also when they have that 10th day, then they are required to do a functional behavior assessment, an FBA, and a behavior intervention plan. Now this can be done for any child that's not on an IEP. It can be done for any kid that just has a behavior problem. And it can be done for any kid that has an IEP, but hasn't been suspended, but it is required when they have been suspended for 10 days. And I want to clarify that 10 days doesn't have to be 10 days in a row. It can be 3 days in January, 3 days in February, 2 days, but it's that 10th day when it seems like that behavior is all similar, then 10 days consecutively throughout the school year too. So the functional behavior assessment it's a systematic process to understand the function and behavior of a student's specific behavior, interfering behavior, and the factors that contribute to that behavior's occurrence or non-occurrence. And the data is gathered directly or indirectly. So they could be doing some assessments and observations. They also do interviews and checklists and look at student records. And they do that when they're doing observation, they look at the ABCs of behavior. So the A stands for antecedent, the B stands for behavior, and the C stands for consequence. So the antecedent is like what happened before that behavior, like who what children are around them, what class are they in, what time of day is it, what day of the week is it, just anything that could possibly be leading to this behavior. And then B is their behavior. What exactly is that problem behavior? And then C is the consequences. So what happened right after? Did the teacher give them a lot of attention, either negative or positive? Did they get sent to the principal's office or in the hall? Did the class laugh? Because sometimes that behavior can reinforce, I mean, sometimes those consequences can reinforce that behavior. And so we want to look at that also. So after they've looked at all that, then they form a hypothesis. Okay, we think this might be causing this behavior, and this might be reinforcing it. And so then they write up a behavior intervention plan, and it includes strategies to replace those negative behaviors, and some antecedent strategies that might be changes to the environment. Maybe they need to sit somewhere different, or maybe they need to be taught how to raise their hand or ask for help instead of crumpling up their paper and throwing it across the room, things like that. So, and this is also a team approach. So everybody should have a way of contributing, and as a Check and Connect mentor, you might know something that happened. Maybe that child went to court and things didn't work out in the way that they wanted. And so you don't have to give all the information, but you could maybe tell the team, you know what, all this happened last month, I think, because there was something with their family. And so, like you can help share good information that would be beneficial to help the child. And then we also need to pay attention, especially in this role, that we need to pay attention to trauma that these kids have been through. And we always need to think, instead of like, what's wrong with this kid, we need to think about what might have happened to this child. And we want to always empower the student instead of punishing the student. We need to figure out, what is this child trying to communicate? Maybe they don't have good communication skills. And so that might need to be written into the behavior intervention plan. And whenever they do this, they need to refer, the USB has a technical assistance manual called the Least Restrictive Behavior Interventions Manual. The LRBI is what's called for short. And that has a lot of resources on behavior interventions. So they need to refer to that. And if you want to go onto the USB website or our website and type that in, if you want some ideas or some ideas that you can share with a teacher or a class, you're welcome to look at that book also. It's available. Okay, last slide. So questions. So one question, can they graduate with an IEP? Yes, absolutely. They can graduate with an IEP. There's different graduation options, and maybe one might be better than another. I'm not going to go into all those, but they can graduate with a regular diploma with an IEP. We talked about, do they need a medical diagnosis? No, they don't. It's always helpful, but they don't. But LauraLee, what LauraLee said, they do need some medical history on some things. And then, do they need a new evaluation IEP when they change schools? No, they don't. The new school can adopt the old IEP if they decide to, or if they decide that, no, we don't agree with this, then they can reevaluate, or they can just change that IEP. They can look at the past evaluations and say, we want to make these kind of changes, and do that. So, but sometimes, like we said, sometimes the records being lost is a giant problem with the YIC world. So I don't know if you guys have a standard. Well, as Check and Connect mentors, you might not, but how long do we wait until we actually do a new evaluation and do a new IEP? I don't know. That's up to the schools, I guess, but at some point they might need to do them. And then what happens when the student turns 18? So when the student turns 18, they are the adult. They are the parent. They don't need to invite the parent. The school actually will not invite the parent anymore. All the paperwork and invitation goes to the child. And unfortunately, with a lot of kids, they're like, I'm not being in special ed anymore, and they discontinue services. But if you feel like they really need that, which obviously, hopefully they do if they're in that, then you can convince them of all the benefits to keeping in that special education, to keep that with that. Because, a lot of these kids are turning 18, their senior year in September. And so then they miss out on that their whole senior year. And then also let them know that they can still get special education services past high school. So a lot of these kids, especially YIC kids, they're not graduating on time because they've been moved so much. And so they have a lot of credit deficiencies. But, let them be aware that they can actually get help in adult education or in a post-high school, which can help them graduate and have that regular diploma, just like anyone else. So, and that can really get them far in life and give them a lot of confidence. So, are there any other questions? And then you can go to the next slide, which is just my contact information. But are there any other questions for me or LauraLee? Or does anyone have anything that they would like to add, or great things that their district does or that you've done? I would love to hear some success stories.
Well, she's not going to do it for herself, so I'm going to brag on Carolyn for a minute. She's a new YIC specialist in Jordan, and she's really taken this on for her team. And she's been doing a lot of investigations and making sure all of the students either have their IEP or they're tracking them down, they're doing new evaluations. So just wanted to brag on Carolyn for her efforts this school year to make sure the kiddos are getting their services. And you can all come off mute if you want to chat.
Yes, please come off mute and say any experiences that you've had. We all learn from each other, right?
I just want to add my 2 cents that in all the years of being involved with this work, especially as I transition out of this work, that how critical what's happening right now is in our system, both in coordination with the Utah Parent Center and with all of the Check and Connect mentors and the incredible team at USBE diving in on this. I think we're really in a unique position structurally to figure this out for a lot of students. And so kudos to everyone on this call, and thank you to Melissa for taking this on. She's had to learn a whole lot about a very complex system in a real quick hurry. And so I think we're in a really unique position to keep moving this work forward on behalf of the students we serve. So kudos to everyone. I mean, again, there's also hiccups. We learned a few more in yesterday's meeting that we're going to have to debrief on with LauraLee and company, just to make sure that we're all clear on exactly how we want this to go. But kudos to everyone that's dedicated to this work.
Yeah, and I kudos to all of you, because I know you do great work, and I feel like you do a great job. You're working with these kids, you care about these kids, you're in this profession because you want to help them as much as you can. So we just want to give you tools to be able to help them more. And please don't feel like any of your questions are dumb, because there's a lot, as I knew about special education, but I didn't know about YIC world. And so that there's so much to learn, and so many questions out there. So, and thank you, LauraLee, for your comments and backup. I appreciate your expertise. And that's all I have. So.
Well, thank you, Melissa. I appreciate you taking that on. As Travis said, that's been a big challenge, I'm sure. And as you saw, I quickly reached out to my special education friends and said, I want to make sure we're doing all the good things and sharing the right information. So that is a big lift. I know it is. It looks like Dave's got his hand raised.
Thank you.
Did you want to share a comment, Dave?
Just clapping. It's the clapper.
Fair enough. I just saw the little yellow flash, admittedly. I didn't see which one it was. So lots of thank yous in the chat. There was a question about the 13. It popped. So I'm looking at 13 categories. 13 categories of eligibility. Is that posted somewhere that's easy to find, or how could we share that out?
Well, they're in the rules. We will give you these slides. Right. And so they will have access to these slides.
There's also, I'm putting a link in the chat right now that has the categories and the specialists at USBE that are available.
Great, thank you. And we have a lot of information about them on our website also, so.
And yes, Carolyn, it's the rules and regulations from the state, this Utah Special Education Rules. Section 2, if you're interested in detailed information.
Okay, well, that's all I have, so I don't know what else.
No, I was just going to say, unless somebody has another question, this is where we get to do the cool thing and add time back into everybody's day. So I'm just scanning the chat to make sure I didn't miss anything.
Yeah, aren't you glad I didn't take 2 hours?
Well, I don't know. It's a topic we could have taken 2 hours on, I feel like.
You probably could have. I'm really sad that DSPD wasn't here to present because I want to learn a lot from them, but
we're going to get them next school year, 100%. One of their staff members just got COVID, unfortunately. So it just kind of changed the schedule there. So yes, kudos to everyone. Thank you for the information you shared. Keep up the good work. As Melissa said, you are all part of this team and one of the important members who knows these students. And let us know if you have questions. I will send out the follow-up with the PDF of the slides. And then I've taken a screenshot of the chat so that I can share out some of these websites that LauraLee gave us as well. So let us know if you have any questions, if you need support, what we can do for you, and we'll see you again in May. Thank you for taking time.
Julia and Amanda, will you stay on here and let me talk to you for a minute?
Sure thing.
Yep.
It's easier
Thanks,
to talk
everyone.
on
Okay, thank you. See ya.
there. Email you guys.
Sometimes it's easier, isn't it?
Yeah. Nobody wants to leave.